Good morning to everyone watching. As by way of introduction, I am John Messmer, and I am a professor of family medicine and geriatrics at Penn State College of Medicine and Penn State Health. And today I was asked to talk about how to stay healthy, which is an important topic because a lot of my work is trying to keep people healthy, not get sick, and not die prematurely. So we're going to talk about that. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I could almost run a months-long class on this to really examine things in depth, but we'll try to get the highlights, give you enough information, and you can even do some research yourself afterwards. So, basics. We'll start with the basics. People come to me and they'll say, I'm using alkaline water and I'm taking this supplement and I'm doing this and doing that. On the internet, everything's recommended. And they say, well, what should I do? And I say, well, supplements, that word means in addition to the usual stuff. So this is the basics. If you're not doing the basics, it doesn't matter what supplements you're taking, you're missing the whole point. So diet is key. Your diet should be mostly plant-based. Now, there's books out there about totally plant-based and all this other stuff, but really we are designed biologically to consume plants, mostly. For generations, for centuries, we didn't get that much meat. You had to hunt it and couldn't preserve it. And if you look at our dentition, we are really designed to grind plants with our molars. So you want to be able to seek out various colors. This one saying is like eat the rainbow. That's all kinds of stuff. I put a picture there, it just shows some examples. You want to avoid or mostly balanced, less sweet fruit. So when I say to people, how much fruit do you eat? They'll say, well, I have cherries and watermelon and pineapple and bananas. And I say, well, those are all sweet, which means they have higher sugar content, and they're not as useful as the other ones that are a little less sweet, like melons, apples, pears, berries. Not that you can't have sweet fruits, it's just that shouldn't be your main source of fruit. Legumes are extremely important. They have a lot of fiber, they have protein, they help to make our guts healthy because the bacteria that should be in our guts love the fiber from legumes. You don't have to eat a huge plate of them. Some people do have trouble with gas formation, but if you start with a little bit and you gradually increase over time, you get used to that. The other thing is you can feed your entire family with beans, lentils, and peas and other legumes for only a few dollars a week if you buy them dried and then cook them. Now that takes time. You can invest in a pressure cooker and that helps speed it along, but you can also buy them canned so they're already cooked. But you should try to incorporate these things in various ways, either in your hot food or your salads and so on. But that's an extremely important part of our diet, and they also have protein. Leafy vegetables. Lettuce, iceberg lettuce is not one of the leafy vegetables you should be seeking to eat. It should be dark green, ideally. I think people are disappointed sometimes when I say that, but spinach, and various other, if you go to the store where they have all the fresh leafy vegetables, you'll see collard greens and all those other ones there. But the latest news is that the most nutritious green leafy vegetable is watercress. I don't eat much watercress. I'm going to start looking for it in the store. But you can eat that raw or cooked. And then grains, and that would include things like rice and wheat and barley and so on and so forth. The best way to eat grains is to cook them and eat them. You can add stuff to them to make them flavorful, but that's the best way. When you start grinding grains into flour and baking them with sugar and butter to make cake and cookies, that's not the way to eat grains. The way to eat grains is the way they're found in nature. In fact, pretty much anything you eat should be as close to the way it's found in nature as possible. That doesn't mean you can't season things and you can't make recipes with them, but when you buy something that's been packaged and put together high in sodium, low in nutrition, that's not the best way to eat any of these things. The important thing, the reason we eat these things is they have the vitamins that you would naturally find that you wouldn't have to take a supplement. They have the important minerals, they have the fiber, and they have good carbohydrates, which again is good for gut health. The quote-unquote bad carbs, bread, rice, potatoes, and pasta. One of the most unhealthy days you would have is if you have a pancake breakfast in the morning and a spaghetti dinner at night. Worst way to do things. It's not that these things are intrinsically bad for you, it's just that if you have them as a large portion of your diet, you're getting, all these carbohydrates turn to sugar. And if you are not burning that sugar off, if you're potential for diabetes, or you are diabetic, or even if you're not, all that extra sugar kind of alters the way your physiology responds. So it's not, you can't have them, but it should be a very small portion. Skip it most of the time. I will mention as far as bread is concerned, because there are a lot of low-carb breads on the market now. Well, not a lot, but there are several. If you look at the package on the bread and you look at the total carbohydrates and subtract the fiber, that gives you the net carbs. There are some that have 0 carbs because they're mostly made of psyllium and other non-absorbable carbohydrates, and they act like bread and taste like bread, so that can avoid a lot of that. And there's low-carb pasta. It's fairly expensive. It's not quite the same, not 100% the same as regular pasta, but it's, if you want to have spaghetti, that would be the one to have. Proteins. So everybody wants enough protein. There's all sorts of protein supplements out there on the market. Most of us would end up getting more protein than we actually need. You need about a half a gram for a pound of ideal body weight. So whatever your ideal body weight is, half of that would be your number of grams of protein. Not that you have to sort of say, oh my God, I didn't get enough protein today, I gotta go have something like a steak. But that's not the way to do this. The sources should be, as I said there, fish is a good source. The fatty fishes are the best. They are healthier for you. They have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. Lean fish is also okay too. And then you want to avoid things like shark, swordfish, king mackerel. Those ones listed there, they have more mercury. If you're pregnant, don't eat them at all. If you are otherwise healthy, a couple of times a month is typically okay. If you just want to avoid mercury altogether, don't eat them. Land animals. If chicken and turkey is fine, not in a lot. Lean red meat is ideal. Bison, venison are very low in fat. So the question of cancer risk keeps getting studied when eating land animals. And if you char meat, that suggests that it increases your risk of intestinal cancer. But basically, you don't need a huge portion of meat. You only need a couple of ounces per serving, and you can get by with only having meat a couple of times a week. If you are a beef farmer, if you're a chicken farmer, if you're raising these animals under your own circumstances and you know that they're not having added antibiotics and you're giving them a balanced nutrition, it's going to be healthier. But when you get meat that's raised in a factory farm, there's all sorts of questions about the value of those meats. And dairy is reasonable as long as you are not lactose intolerant. there are ways to get past that, but we all need calcium. Women particularly need calcium, so these are good sources of that. But I want to make a plug for tofu. There was a time when tofu was sold in blocks, and you had to look at it and say, what the heck do I do with this? Unless you come from an Asian background, in which case you know exactly what to do with it. But they sell tofu now that's already been prepared in various ways, so there's very little you have to do except heat it up. But tofu will adopt the flavoring you add to it. So you can, and with the internet, there are infinite number of tofu recipes that are really quite good, and I eat tofu a lot. Sodium, you want to minimize your sodium if you can. That 2,300 milligrams is there as a reference, because if you pick up a package and you look at the serving and it says 1,800 milligrams of sodium per serving, you know that you've had almost all your sodium with that one thing. And if you have heart disease, especially heart failure, kidney disease, restaurants are the worst. Cooks add salt because it enhances the flavor. You can't get a cook to not add salt. I understand that, and I'm not necessarily criticizing that, but I've looked at the nutritional content of various restaurants around here, and people with heart failure could eat a lethal amount of sodium in just one meal some places, so you have to be very careful about that. Exercise. Any exercise is better than no exercise. You don't have to be an athlete. The ideal would be 30 minutes of something that gets your heart rate up 4 times a week. But if you don't hit that because you're busy or whatever, just do something. People say, I don't have time for exercise. Yeah, everybody has time for some exercise. I mean, even if it's a 5-minute walk in the morning and a 5-minute walk in the evening, And gradually you can say, well, all right, well, if I'm doing 10 minutes a day, maybe I could do 20 minutes a day. If you want to get ideal fitness, you should aim, you check your heart rate, you should aim for what 70% of the maximum predicted heart rate, which is 220 minus your age multiplied by 0.7. So you can see if you're 20, you want to try to get to 140 beats per minute. If you're 50, you want to get to 119, and you can go on up the scale. But you can exceed the goal. So if you're fairly fit and you've been exercising and you're there on the treadmill and you're looking down and you're, say, 74 years old like me, and you're getting a heart rate of 135 beats per minute, well, my goal is 105 beats per minute to get fitness. If I go 135 beats per minute, that's okay, because I don't have coronary artery disease, so you can exceed it if there's no reason that your doctor told you shouldn't cut down. And you get, the reason that exercise is good, because it's good for your heart, it's good for your bones, it's good for your muscles, it's good for your mental state. Having endurance, being able to have the energy to get through the day, do what you need to do, helps you to sleep better, reduces your risk of all those problems. And the other thing for fitness would be strength and balance. So you don't need to be a bodybuilder, but it's good to have something against resistance, light weights. It's best if you're going to do that you have guidance as to how to do it, because if you start lifting weights but you're doing it wrong, you can actually strain things. But even just walking with a couple of pounds weights in your hands is something that you can do. It improves your mobility. If you want to be able to get up and do what you want to do in your 80s and your 90s, it helps to be doing regular exercise and also to have strength. You need to be able to get up out of a chair, and you need to be able to get up off the floor. So that means your quadriceps and your leg muscles need to be strong. And so doing something very simple like deep knee bends, holding on to something. I have my patients who aren't doing anything to start with a half a squat, 3 sets of 10, and if they can do that without fatigue, then they go deeper, and if they can do that without fatigue, then add some weights, because you need to be able to get up off the floor. One of the biggest, not one of the biggest, but one of the scariest things for people who get older is they fall at home, there's no one there, and they can't get off the floor. And if you lie on the floor for 24 hours, you're going to end up breaking down muscle and possibly go into kidney failure. So you need to be strong enough to get up. If you leave now, you've heard half the problems that I treat. Okay? Smoking, lack of exercise, bad diet, that's half of what we treat. So you can all go home and say, just do that. I always tell people, if you don't want to listen to me for anything else, just do that. But sleep is important. Not only does enough sleep help you to function the next day, it helps your memory, helps you to be able to think what you need to do, but during sleep we clean out junk from our brains. And there is a thought, it's not completely established, but there's this thought that dementia, one of the problems with dementia is we don't get rid of the junk in our brains. And so having enough sleep helps to do that and just feel better. People who tell me, well, you know, I go by 5 or 6 hours of sleep and I'm fine. Well, you're fine now, but maybe you're not as fine as you think. But so you need some sleep. Which isn't to say if you had one night where you only got 5 hours, you know, that's every once in a while that's okay. I mean, I went through 4 years of medical school and 3 years of residency with not enough sleep. But I try to make up for it now. Alcohol. Boy, this is controversial. No alcohol is the best. I mean, that's the latest thing. Alcohol is a toxin. Now, for a long time, there was this idea that you could have a glass of red wine, it was going to be beneficial for you, but more studies that really look at it in depth say, well, you know, universally, maybe that's not such a good thing. I can't tell you there's an absolute answer for everybody. A lot depends on your own physical condition. If you have a history of ulcers, if you have a history of liver disease, probably not. But if you're going to drink, the guide is that 1 standard drink a day for women and 2 standard drinks a day for men. Now, you don't want to have all your standard drinks on Saturday, like 14 drinks for men. That's the wrong way. But alcohol does affect a lot of other things. So no alcohol is better, but it doesn't seem to be a huge amount of danger from a little bit of alcohol from time to time, as long as you're drinking for the social whatever benefits rather than drinking for anxiety or I had a hard day at work, I need a drink kind of thing. And a standard drink, 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of distilled spirits. Each of those comes out to about an ounce of pure alcohol. Don't drink an ounce of pure alcohol, it really burns. Smoking. So it turns out there's a calculation for the safe number of cigarettes you can have in a day. You take the current year, 2025, you subtract the year of your birth, and then subtract the age you will be on December 31st, and that's how many cigarettes you can have in a day. So the math people got that. Obviously, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, crack, meth, etc. There's just no reason for any of this to be in our diets or our day. Now, THC for marijuana, CBD, it's complicated. We couldn't research THC for generations due to federal regulations, and now we're finding more and more stuff out. And it is legally available in Pennsylvania with a card, and other states without a card. There are some benefits from marijuana, from the use of THC, and it's way too complex for me to go into them all right now. But the CBD is relatively safe. Some people get some benefit by rubbing CBD oil on a joint. Some people use CBD to help them sleep. As far as we know right now, that's probably safe. THC is a whole other thing, because THC has psychological effects. Children should avoid THC altogether. Children and up to age 25 ideally, because our brains are still developing. And if you have a genetic predisposition toward substance abuse, the earlier your exposure, the more likely you're going to have a problem with it. But this could be a separate lecture. So if you have pain and you can get by CBD oil, you should have to be careful of the source, because again, everything that says CBD oil is not going to be the best source. So, and I can tell you some reliable sources. Young Living, my wife is a certified clinical aromatherapist, and she buys all her essential oils from Young Living, and we know that they're certified and they're prepared properly. There may be others too out there, but you have to be sort of cautious about that, because just saying they have the oil doesn't mean it's going to be. It's kind of like olive oil, there's extra virgin and pure, and it's all different. Okay, let's talk about infectious diseases. There's more and more measles coming around, because goodness knows some people think we shouldn't be immunized at all, and that they're dangerous. But I'm going to put that aside. I will tell you that if you were born in 1957 or before, you are considered immune to measles, regular measles, because it was so prevalent and so infectious that you either had it or were exposed to it and had a subclinical case and you have antibodies. Now, when measles vaccine came out, the original one was not quite as good as the one that has been used since around the mid-1960s. And so for people who were born sometime around 60 to 67 might have received a less effective killed measles vaccine. You can have your antibodies tested to see if you have antibodies. Do you need to be re-immunized? So let's say you were born in 1957 or 58 and you want to know, do I need to be re-immunized? You can have your antibody levels checked. There's not any downside to getting another dose of immunization. But if you had 2 doses of measles vaccine and were born early enough, you're considered okay. Now, if you have exposure to unimmunized children, somebody in your family just doesn't believe in vaccines, and you're going to be visiting them, or you're moving to a place like Texas or Florida or one of these places where there's some outbreaks, talk to your doctor and see if there's a risk. There's no real downside to getting immunized a couple of times. Anybody who's been in the military has probably had measles shots multiple times. But you need 2 weeks to build up the immunity, so plan ahead. But if you have young children, they need to get the measles vaccine. Extremely infectious, and the downside is that can cause brain problems, lung problems, and you can die from measles. And if you get it as an adult and you haven't been immunized, it can be really serious. Shingles, which is herpes zoster, that's chickenpox. Again, most people who were born before roughly 1970 or so have had chickenpox. Very infectious. For the most of us, not that dangerous, except that the virus stays in our system for the rest of our lives. And if we have a healthy immune system, it helps to suppress our ability to fight it off. But for some people, the immune system doesn't suppress it, and it reactivates, and then you get a painful rash. People don't typically die from shingles, but some people feel that they wish they were dead from shingles because it can be very painful. But if you get it around your eye, it can damage your eye. So if you have shingles sap eruption up here, you need to talk to your doctor that day and get on antiviral medication. But there was a Zostavax vaccine that was out for a long time. The problem with that is that immunity did not last very long. So now we're using Shingrix, that's a brand, and it is a different version. 2 doses after age 50 will protect you for a long time. If you had the original one, Zostavax, you should get the Shingrix. Tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis. We don't think about this too much because you don't see much tetanus because almost everybody's had tetanus vaccine. Not so much worried about people's getting tetanus because it's not common, but it's not from rusty nails. It's from bacteria in the soil. Rusty nails typically have been in the ground and they pick up bacteria, the Clostridium bacteria that can cause tetanus. So if you get immunized every 10 years, if it's been 20 years, you probably have some immunity. It doesn't wear off all that quickly, but it's not a bad idea. But the reason we give the tetanus is it's almost always combined with diphtheria and pertussis. Diphtheria is an infectious disease carried by droplets. If you are exposed to someone with diphtheria, you can pick up the germs. It causes a throat infection, but the toxin causes paralysis and a number of different problems that are potentially fatal. Pertussis, children, that's whooping cough. Children, babies, and young toddlers who get pertussis get whooping cough, and they have a really bad cough, and they can get pneumonia from it. We immunize everybody whose parents accept the concept of immunizations, and so the children aren't going to get it. But it takes 4 doses to sustain full immunity against pertussis. So if you have grandchildren or great-grandchildren who are under age 2 or so, and you get pertussis, you can spread it to them. So you may have your daughters or whatever saying to you, you need to get a pertussis shot because if you're going to come see the new baby, because you're old. And fortunately, most of my patients have already had their boosters, so that's every 10 years. If we get pertussis as adults, we call it the 100-day cough. Most of us won't die if we don't have bad lungs or bad heart, but you'll cough for 3 months, and it's not fun. So get your DPT, or TDAP we call it. HPV, most of us who are in a stable sexual relationship and have grown up since the 70s probably aren't going to get HPV, but HPV is extremely important. This is a cancer immunization. Males and females can get cancer of the cervix, cancer of the anus, cancer of the throat from human papillomavirus. We are trying to immunize children starting around age 11 so that regardless, and I would say to the parents, I'm sure that your child is only going to have sex with one person for the rest of their lives, but what about the person they had sex with? How many people did they have sex with? So, you need to get this sort of thing. It's very important. Hepatitis, I mentioned this because just for completion, and meningitis vaccines is mostly for people, and it's going to be in large crowds like college students or military people. Most of us don't really need to do that unless we anticipate being exposed on a regular basis. And hepatitis A and B, hepatitis B is a bloodborne or sexually transmitted disease. Unless you're a healthcare laboratory person, someone who's going to be exposed to blood, you don't need hepatitis B. There's nothing wrong with you getting the vaccine, but you don't really need it. But hepatitis A is a fecal oral infection. If you go to a restaurant and one of the servers or one of the people in the kitchen has active hepatitis A and doesn't wash their hands, you can get hepatitis A virus on the food. If you get your green leafy vegetables from some country where they use human waste for fertilization, you can pick up hepatitis A. There have been outbreaks reported from time to time. So hepatitis A vaccine is a good one, and we give this routinely to children now without getting into the politics of this, but there was a fairly high prevalence of hepatitis A through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and CDC said, why don't we start immunizing people? They started on the West Coast where it was very prevalent, and the rates of hepatitis A just plummeted. Just plummeted. There's almost no hepatitis A among children now because we give it routinely to everybody. And so people say, why do we give a vaccine for something that's not common? Well, it's not common because we give the vaccine. So that's why. But it's okay to get that as an adult if you want to make sure that you can eat at a restaurant where you don't have to worry about the kitchen help. I don't mean that to be smart, but you know what I mean. Streptococcus pneumonia. So you've all heard of strep throat. That is strep viridans. Streptococcus pneumoniae is one of the 50 plus strains of strep, but strep pneumoniae can be very lethal. It causes not only does it cause pneumonia, which is why it's called Streptococcus pneumoniae, but it also causes invasive blood infections, which can be very rapidly fatal. We have a vaccine or an immunization. I use the word vaccine and immunization interchangeably, but technically a vaccine is like smallpox, it's a live virus injected into you, and immunization is everything else. But Prevnar 20 is the current immunization for this. There was Prevnar 13 for a long time that we were giving, and that was the only one we had available. There was also Pneumovax 23, and it was only by immunizing a lot of people that we began to realize that the Prevnar 20, the Prevnar works better than the Pneumovax. We were giving both for a while. Now, the Pneumovax 23 is optional. It doesn't really add anything. If you get Prevnar, that's the better coverage. If you had Prevnar 13, when that was the one that was available, you should get Prevnar 20 to get those extra 7 strains. And there's no problem with getting it a second time. This is one of the easiest vaccines to take. I tell everybody, nobody calls me and complains it makes them feel sick. Just get it. And insurance covers it because it's a preventive. So if you haven't had that, stick with your doctor and get that one. That's really important. I often tell people, they say, well, I don't know if I want to say, you know what, you're not leaving this office till you get this vaccine. I haven't actually tied them down, but that's okay, influenza. Recommendations for annually for everyone over 6 months. It's annually because the virus is constantly changing. The vaccine itself is not powerful. It's not 100% effective. And one of the complaints that people often say to me is, well, it's going to make me feel sick for a day and it doesn't really protect you. Well, if you're young and healthy and you don't mind getting the flu, fine, but of course you can spread it to everybody else, so that's part of the issue. If everyone in Hershey, Palmyra, the surrounding 100-mile radius, 100% vaccine administration, there would be no flu because everyone would be less likely to get it, but you can't get people to do that. But we do recommend it for everybody. Young children, older adults, people who are immunocompromised, people with heart and lung disease, people who could be sick and end up in the hospital should get it. It's going to help. If you get the flu after the flu vaccine, it's likely to be less severe. And the flu vaccine definitely reduces your likelihood of having to be hospitalized because of influenza complications. There's ongoing work to try to find what's common in every flu virus that they can immunize you against so that you don't have to get it every year. That's not quite there yet, but hang on. Respiratory syncytial virus, this is important. RSV has been around a long time. It's a seasonal virus that tends to show up in the winter. And again, like everything else, people who are older have increased risk from this infection because you're more likely to have lung disease or heart disease or whatever. If you're highly fit at 75, you're not as at risk as if you had a heart attack or heart failure, kidney disease, diabetes, or lung disease. But the big deal is that it's a big problem for newborns. For a long time, we would give newborns who were underweight and who were born during the RSV season, we would give them a shot of the antibodies against RSV to reduce the likelihood of them catching it. Now we can give pregnant women RSV vaccine at 32 to 36 weeks of gestation, and their antibodies will transfer over to the baby, and that will protect them. So it's important for pregnant women, and it's ideal for people over 75. Or if you're younger than that, you happen to have heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, or some other thing that predisposes you to severe complications, then you can get it. It's one-time dose, sorry, not once a year, one-time dose. Dramatically reduces your risk of hospitalization and respiratory failure. And that's pretty well tolerated too. I'm not getting people complaining to me about that. There are three versions available, and these are, people want to know how it's made. This is one of those ones where the protein on the RSV virus is synthesized either by putting a little bit of the DNA into another virus where it is made and then extracted, or they just use the mRNA. That's what mResvia is. They put the mRNA shot into you, like with the COVID, and you produce the antibodies in your own cells. I haven't seen mResvia around in the pharmacies, but the other two are around. COVID. So a few years ago, this was a huge problem. People aren't too worried about it. The biology of the COVID virus is, and other viruses, they will mutate so that they become more infectious but less lethal. If you figure that COVID is something that's typically mostly in humans, it can be obviously in monkeys and bats and so on, but if you get it in humans and it were to wipe out the entire human population, the COVID virus would have no place to live and it would stop living, it would disappear. So as they mutate to be able to infect more people so that the population of COVID viruses continues to live, but it doesn't want to be killing the hosts. Okay, so that's what happens biologically. This is why you're not hearing about as much about people dying of COVID as you used to. It could make you sick, you can put you in respiratory failure, you might spend some time on oxygen or on a respirator in the hospital, and you may survive. But it's not all about survival, because it also can damage your lungs and your GI tract, and that can give you, and you can get this neurologic disease, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is long COVID. You keep making antibodies against the COVID, and it keeps attacking part of your body, and it can be, it's like chronic fatigue syndrome. Other viruses do it also, but you don't want to, push your luck. So getting the COVID vaccine will reduce your likelihood of having it. It'll reduce your likelihood if you get COVID, because it's not 100% protective. If you get COVID, it's more likely to be a milder case, and it dramatically reduces your risk of being hospitalized or going into respiratory failure. There are treatments if you show up with COVID. If you test for COVID, within 5 days of onset of symptoms, you should get one of these, Paxlovid and Lagevrio, I never know how to say this, Molnupiravir. Both of those are oral drugs that are effective in shortening the course of COVID. The remdesivir is an intravenous, and we use that in the hospital. But you need to get it started within 5 days of the onset of symptoms. Now, how to protect yourself, hand washing is standard, because a lot of our stuff is, we inoculate ourselves, we pick it up on our hands. So good hand washing, don't touch your face or anything until you've washed your hands, or use alcohol. Alcohol kills almost everything except the cause of Clostridium, antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So that's a whole other topic. Hand wash, the masks. Again, controversy about masks. They're not 100%, but they do significantly cut down on the amount of virus that you spread to others or that they spread to you. So masks do work. They need to be in relatively good shape. If you use the same mask for 3 months, it's probably not protecting you. A regular surgical mask is fine. Just get it on tight and wear it where you're supposed to. This is an N95 mask. That's the best way, because they can really seal up better, but you have to make sure that it fits properly and it's on properly. It has 2 straps, and they come in different sizes, and it has to be up tight against your face. If you have a beard like I do, it makes it a little harder to get a proper seal. When you get one of these and you put it on and make it snug, first just hold on to it and try to inhale and exhale, and if you shouldn't be it should be hard to exhale. And the other way to do this is to spray some perfume in the air and go in and see if you can smell it, because if you can smell it, then you can inhale the virus too, so it's got to be tight. The new thing, which this is the coolest thing, I have this Astapro, which is available over the counter. It turns out that Astapro, this is just published recently, Astapro attaches to the receptor in your nasal passages that the COVID virus and many other viruses attach to, and it has been shown to significantly reduce the infection rate. So if you wear an N95 mask and use Astapro every day, which is available over the counter, it really cuts down your risk of getting COVID. So if you're seriously paranoid, or if you're going on an airplane trip, that's the best way. If you don't want to walk around with an N95 mask and you use the Astapro and you avoid people are coughing and sneezing and so on, that's pretty good too. But the ideal way would be N95 mask and now Astapro. And I'm just letting you know what the research shows. So I found that very interesting. Questions? Yes.
How long has that been out?
Just was published this week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So really hot news.
Yeah, it's hot news. So there was a prescription strength Astapro, which was 1% azolastine, but the 1.5% azolastine, which is in the over-the-counter version, is better. The 1% works, but it's more expensive. Actually, I'm not sure you can get it by prescription anymore. It's all over the counter. 1 spray each nostril once a day. I haven't tried this yet. I have to go to the store and get some, because I'm exposed all the time. Question, yes?
My wife's gonna be very upset when I tell her that I can safely drink twice as much as
Yes,
she
you
can.
can.
What's the science behind male versus female alcohol?
So why can men drink twice as much as women? It's because the men are the scientists doing the research. No, I'm only kidding. Alcohol, when you drink alcohol, you absorb it, it has to be metabolized, and men have more muscle as a rule. And it's that extra muscle and the extra body fluid, you have more body water, and so it's more distributed, and so it tends not to build up a blood level as high, as quickly, and men also process it more quickly in their livers than women. Now, that's the average man and the average woman. You know, a woman who's a muscle builder and does a lot of intense exercise compared to a man who's a couch potato, you know, it's different. But as a rule, men have more muscle and process it faster. So it doesn't build up a blood level as quickly in a man as in a woman.
So that's a reason to exercise more.
Right. So you can drink more, yes. Yes, sir.
Can you get multiple vaccines? I think you can, but does it depend on what the vaccine is?
So can you get multiple vaccines?
At the same time?
At the same time. Yes, you can. A lot of places, like a lot of people get into pharmacies now, which is kind of nice, it's convenient, are reluctant to give too many at one time because if you get sick, they don't know which thing caused the problem, basically. There are some live virus vaccines have to be given either at the same time or weeks before another one. Without worrying about that, leave it up to the person who's administering your vaccines. If you have a need to get caught up because you're leaving the country for 6 months or something, you can get multiple vaccines all at once. So yeah, it's okay. But as a rule, most of the time, but we feel a little uncomfortable only because if you call and say I had a bad reaction, I don't know what you had a bad reaction to.
And COVID and flu is very common for getting at the same time?
Yeah, you can get COVID and flu at the same time. You can get COVID and Prevnar 20 at the same time. You can get the flu and COVID. Yeah, you can get all of them at the same time, but yes, it's okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On the Prevnar, how often should you get reboosted?
Prevnar is supposed to be once. If you get 2 shots, no, excuse me, 1 shot. I beg your pardon. 1 shot is enough. If you have Prevnar 13, you get Prevnar 20, that's enough. We believe, I say this, but in 20 years, I could come back and say, well, it turns out it didn't last that long. But it probably will last. The people who got Prevnar 13 are typically okay, except that they don't have those other 7 strains of the strep and that they're protected against. So we believe that's a long-lasting one. So it should be just once.
Because I've had all 3.
I'm sorry?
I've had all 3.
Oh, have you? So all, yeah. So you're pretty good. Pretty good
Well,
shape there.
I mean, I have a lung condition,
And you should get it.
and I the same with Tdap. I get that religiously every time. In fact, I'm due that this year.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice when I open a patient's chart. I always check their immunizations. I'm like, oh, good, they don't need any. So, because you have to get rid of a salesman sometimes.
Is an RSV shot, is that a heavy duty shot, or you said the pneumonia is really easy, but I haven't had either of those, and it's always a question mark, but I always got the other ones first.
Yeah,
So-
so RSV is pretty well tolerated. Occasionally people feel like, you know, I got something, but they don't get sick. I mean, I haven't really had people come back. I'll tell you that the shingles vaccine, if, you know, for fair warning here, the first shingles shot is usually well tolerated. The second one often makes you feel a little ill.
A lot ill, I did.
Yeah, well, it could be a lot ill too. You know, I had that experience this when I had it. I woke up one day and I said, what's going on with me? Oh, I had my shingles shot yesterday. You know, so shingles can be an issue. Some people do react to COVID, but again, if you're making antibodies and your immune system is being stimulated, depending on the intensity of your immune response, you might feel like you're coming down with something. And you know, I say if you do that, that means your immune system has been turned on. That's exactly what we want. But you're not infected with anything. So it's not like it's going to propagate in your system and continue to make you sick like it would if you actually got COVID. Yes?
I'll show you how old I am now, because I'm now concerned about what you said about sleep. Because I taught, and when I taught, I was a mother and a wife and a Sunday school teacher. And so for maximum 5 hours, week after week, year after year, and you said that that might contribute to Alzheimer's. And I'm thinking, I can't make up those now, I can't make up that. Well, tell me, clarify that for an old lady in her 80s.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So someone's in their 80s now who was a wife and mother and teacher or had a job and couldn't get 8 hours of sleep for a long part of her life, but now is able to get as much sleep as she wants. Is she at risk for Alzheimer's? You got to your 80s and you're functioning, so don't lose any sleep over it. But if you're 40,
That's bad.
if you're 40, 45, 50, 30, and you're still in the work time and you're not getting enough sleep, do the best you can to try to get that extra sleep. Take a nap during the day for a little bit if you need to. Ideally, you do that. We all have to work. We all have responsibilities, and if your family, it's a little bit more complicated. But if you have the genes that predispose you to dementia, if you have you're at risk for atherosclerosis. If you have diabetes, you smoke, you're sedentary, you're overweight, you have high cholesterol, that puts you at risk for atherosclerosis, which is a big contributor to dementia. You really should make an effort to get enough sleep. But once you get to your 80s, you made it. You got through the gauntlet. You're okay. Now, what you'd like to have is, if you live long enough, your brain's not going to be functioning as well as it was when you're younger. But you'd like to be that like the last week or two of your life, and that be it.
Are these people praying for me right now?
That's right. Yeah, prayer is probably a really good thing for you.
That's a really good
But
thing.
I just heard a gerontologist say that as we get older, our brain slows down. It doesn't mean that we are getting Alzheimer's, we're just,
Yeah. So the question
it
of
takes longer to do normal
Right.
tasks.
Your brain slows down as you get older, and that is the truth. So, trying to remember things, recall drives me crazy.
Yeah, I
Okay?
understand that.
Drives me crazy because I'll be wanting to prescribe medicine. I know exactly what it does. I can talk about its pharmacology, what it interacts with, what it's treated for, how much it costs. I can't remember the name. So yeah.
Then you talk about something else and there it is.
And there it is, exactly. What I do is I pull out my phone and I look up and, I look up under the classification of drugs and I slide, oh yeah, that's the one I want. But I've always had trouble remembering people's names too. But yeah, so your brain is not as efficient as you get older. So recall and processing can be a little bit slow. It's interesting. My 15-year-old stepdaughter, when she was 5, she got up on her mom's phone and established a YouTube account. I still can't know. I could figure it out, but I don't need a YouTube account. But so the point is that the young brain processes very, very quickly. The frontal lobes give better concentration. We lose some of that function. There's this thing about scientists who do their best work in their 30s and 40s, and then they stop producing because the creativity and the ability to focus is less as time goes by. Not 100%. There are a lot of people who make outstanding contributions in their 60s and 70s, but we do slow down our processing a little bit. So if it takes you a little longer to figure something out, then you can still figure it out. The big thing is, if I have a conversation with someone, can I recall the conversation later? If I get something that has to be put together or if something has to be figured out, can I figure it out? Those are the big things. Memory is not the main thing in Alzheimer's disease. It's part of it. Executive function is the thing in Alzheimer's disease. The ability to think through things, to figure out how to go from some place to place. If you made a wrong turn somewhere when you're driving, because GPS told you to do it, and then you say, how do I get out of this? If you sit still and shut off the car because you can't figure out where to go, that's a problem. But if you say, okay, let me check this out, I can go here, I can go there, call somebody, you can figure out what to do about it. And that's the big difference between people who are getting dementia and people who aren't having dementia. You might not figure it out as quickly as somebody else. So our frontal lobes are not as powerful. So the ability to concentrate on something, you have a conversation with someone and then you walk away and you forget what it was because you weren't focused on it. Men do this all the time their entire lives. It's part of the genetics of being a male. I'm kidding, that's not true. If you and I, if any of you walk out here today and you say, yeah, Messmer was talking about this, he was talking about that, that's fine. But if you say, yeah, it was something, I can't remember who was talking, I think it was a health thing, but I can't remember what they talked about. That's a bit more of a concern.
I've heard that if you have concussions in the younger years, then you might be okay, that it does affect you in the older years. Is that true?
Depends on, concussions, when you're younger, how much does it affect you later? Don't have a concussion. Your brain is soft and it doesn't like to be banged around. But if you do have a concussion, it isn't necessarily so that you're going to have problems later on. It depends on how bad a concussion, how many concussions, what part of your brain was affected, how quickly you recovered, your overall general health, and so on. People who get multiple concussions, football players and other sports people, even hockey players and whatnot, if you whack your head enough times, it can lead to problems later on. Not 100%. It's like it depends on the circumstances. Ideally, you would not get any concussions at all. But just because you had some or somebody you know had a couple, you don't necessarily have to plan for them to be in long-term care when they're 50. Yeah.
And later on in life, losing some brain function or something like that, does that have to do with blood flow to the brain?
Yet that can affect it. If you have atherosclerotic disease, all those things that contribute to poor blood flow, that can be part of it, but it isn't necessarily. It's also just the processing. We do lose some neurons over as a factor of age, and this is a whole other area of research because it looks like good nutrition, regular exercise can help preserve those connections later, but you do lose connections just through the aging process. So, but a lot depends on how you started out. I mean, there are people who have been very creative and intellectually stimulating in their 90s. They probably started out with better brains. They maybe took better care of them. But atherosclerosis, and I tell this is one of my things I can sell statins. I'll just go off on a little tangent here. Cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, your bad cholesterol, for the most part should be less than 100. This is not by the book. The book says it should be less than 130, unless you have heart disease. Then it should be under 100, it should be 70. My chief complaint is, why wait until you have a heart attack to get your cholesterol under control? The other organ that can be affected is your brain. So they have a way to predict a 10-year cardiac risk, a formula, but I say, I'm not an interventional cardiologist, so I'm not worried about whether I'm going to have to do an angioplasty on you. I worry about whether you're going to get brain problems later on, strokes or dementia. I have a 50-year brain risk, but it's hard to study people for 50 years, and it's hard to compare people who are treated and not treated. But I'll tell you, the things that reduce your risk of dementia are not smoking, regular exercise, normal weight, controlled diabetes, controlled blood pressure, and have a low cholesterol, or eating a diet that controls your cholesterol. Each of those individually reduces your risk of dementia. I say do them all. And if you are making way too much cholesterol, despite your good diet and exercise and everything else, you need to be on a statin. Because statins, not only do they lower cholesterol, but they make the arteries healthy so that there's less likely for stuff to get stuck. So your big arteries in your neck may not get clogged up, but the tiny little arteries in your brain can get clogged up, and little by little you lose neurons. And so there's reasonably good evidence to say that taking a statin, even if you have normal cholesterol, there are physicians with normal cholesterol who take statins to protect their brains.
Why is HDL good?
So HDL takes cholesterol out of the circulation back to the liver to get processed. If you don't have enough of it, you're not taking it out as much. But you can have HDL that doesn't do the work either. So there's 5 types of HDL, there's 5 types of LDL. It gets a little complicated,
Okay.
but HDL brings the bad cholesterol back for processing to get rid of it.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? We good?
Got a few minutes?
I've
Yeah?
always
okay.
heard the ratio LDL to HDL is.
So the ratio of the ratio of HDL, LDL to HDL. I used to use that all the time, but I don't find it all that helpful. I look at the absolute numbers. You want to have the LDL low. Now, many times people will have an LDL that's borderline. The LDL might be 105, and I said it should be under 100, and their HDL is like 60 or 70 or higher, and your triglycerides are low. Like triglycerides should be under 150. So if your triglycerides are low, say 50, and your HDL is say 60, if your LDL is 105, that you probably have most of that LDL is probably the non-sticky kind. We say it's the large molecules, which, because they're large, the number tends to be bigger, but they don't tend to stick to the arteries. And there are ways to figure that out. Well, I'll do a test called an ApoB100. If you have a lot of ApoB100, that means that's attached to your LDL. That's the part of the LDL that sticks to the arteries. If you have a lot of it, then you probably should have your cholesterol lowered. But if you have a little bit of it, you're probably okay. And as long as doing everything else right, you reduce your risk. Cholesterol is just one thing. Blood pressure is more important than cholesterol. Smoking is the most important thing. If you smoke, you know, again, we have no drug to treat your smoking. But cholesterol is just one of those things. So don't worry so much about the ratio as to what those numbers are doing.
I've read that statins over a long time can harm the body. Is that true? I'm just asking.
Yeah. So
because I've been on a statin for 30
statins
years.
harm the body after a long time? No. No, they just don't.
Okay.
This is propagated by, I don't know who, somebody.
Anti-vaccine people.
Yeah, so you have to be careful about the source of that information.
Okay.
Sure.
Have you treated patients with long COVID, as with loss of taste?
Yeah, a few people with long COVID I have treated, but there's no good treatment. You have to try to attack the individual issues. Good nutrition, get adequate rest. Nutrition is really important because our guts are our guts need a certain balance of the right kind of carbohydrates in order to function well, and because our guts have an immune system, and the immune system works better when the bacterial balance is the right kind of bacteria. Now, I can't name those bacteria because the scientists haven't even figured that out, but we do know that if you have a high fiber diet, rich in fruits and vegetables, your gut flora is more likely to be healthy. For C. diff, that you get if you've been on antibiotics for a long time, if you have good gut flora, you're less likely to have a C. diff problem, but because it competes.
Speaking of antibiotics, did you speak about that at the beginning?
I didn't talk too much about it. I don't think I mentioned much about antibiotics.
Importance of,
See, my memory isn't that good.
of not taking antibiotics excessively.
You don't want to take antibiotics that you don't need, basically. So, quick thing about antibiotics, if you don't actually have a bacterial infection, you should not have an antibiotic. Now, with respiratory illnesses, sometimes it's hard to know if you have bacteria because you have to kind of get up there and get some of the mucus for culture. It's not fun, and it often doesn't help because we all have bacteria living in our nose and throat. It isn't bothering us. But if you get, so somebody calls me and says, it's Friday afternoon, I just came down with pressure in my sinuses and there's some stuff draining and I need to get on an antibiotic. Well, if it just happened, bacterial infections typically don't come up that fast. It's almost always a virus first. And the typical course for most viruses is you feel bad for a day or two, then you feel less bad, and then over several days you feel less bad, and then eventually it's gone. That's the virus. But if you feel bad for a day or two and you call me and I say, take decongestants, saline rinses, get plenty of rest, let me know if things are getting worse. Because what happens with the secondary bacterial infection is you feel bad for a couple of days, you start to get better, then you get worse and worse and feel sicker. And of course, if you're a smoker or if you have diabetes or you have a history of multiple infections, then I would put you on an antibiotic at that point. The infectious disease people will tell you, you really should give it 2 weeks before you add an antibiotic. So if you've been sick for 2 weeks and you haven't gotten worse, what you're probably doing is you have some of your normal bacteria in there and you just can't clear it, your body just can't clear it. So you go with a very focused antibiotic for the shortest period of time, like 5 days, something that's not broad spectrum, that's going to kill everything, and you can usually get your normal bacteria under control so that you can recover from that. And that's kind of the way to do it, but I don't want to be sick for 2 weeks before I start, antibiotic. So it's not, and it's really, it's a little bit of educated guess as to whether to start you on an antibiotic. And you know, I over the years, I've probably given people antibiotics who didn't need them. We've been doing an ongoing study with children with respiratory infections, tracking how many times we're giving antibiotics for that, and most of us are not doing it very much, which is a good thing.
But zinc lozenges for colds.
Zinc lozenge, yeah. The placebo effect is very powerful. If you think it's going to help, it might.
You just broken the bubble. Can I ask you to bring up about arthritis? I think the last time you did a talk, you talked about the one thing that you talk about, sometimes you glucosamine chondroitin or whatever.
Yeah.
But would you have any other thoughts about pain from arthritis?
Okay, so pain from arthritis, I mentioned in a previous lecture, glucosamine and chondroitin. If your cartilages are still in pretty good shape, extra glucosamine and chondroitin seems to help. It gets in there. Glucosamine is found in our food, but not in the quantity that you can get when you take a pill. And it should make your cartilages a little more flexible, a little more resistant to wear and tear. Doesn't work for everybody. If you already have arthritis, it's too late. But what else to do for pain? Topical anti-inflammatories like diclofenac gel, 1%, is pretty good for a localized joint. CBD oil can help with that. Acupuncture, I've been doing acupuncture now for a year. Acupuncture works pretty well for chronic, for pains of that sort of thing. If your kidneys and stomach are okay, there's nothing wrong with taking Advil or Aleve on an as-needed basis for that. Exercise is also good too. Low-level exercise is good for mild to moderate osteoarthritis, particularly in the knees and hips.
Voltaren, so that new.
Voltaren is available in a gel. That's diclofenac. It's also available as an oral tablet. They're relatively safe for most people, but we have to be careful about if you already have kidney and liver. If you're on a chronic anti-inflammatory medicine, I'll check your kidneys twice a year just to make sure they're holding up okay. So there you go.
Thank you.
Yes.
If you have an aspirin allergy, is Voltaren a problem?
If you have an aspirin allergy, you can probably take those other drugs. Some of them are chemically related to aspirin, so you have to make sure that we look at the list and see which ones. The only way to find out is to try it. If you don't need the anti-inflammatory, don't use it, but if you need one, we start with one that's not related to aspirin and see if you tolerate it. You could develop an allergy over time.
What's anti-inflammatory that's not related to aspirin?
I always have to refer to the books, because some of them are, none of them is actually like aspirin, but some of them have based, the molecule is kind of similar, close to it. Yeah. And Tylenol works for some people. And Tylenol, what did they say Tylenol's called now? I forget, I don't even pay attention anymore because it's like, I don't even listen to this stuff. But yeah, you can take Tylenol too, it is safe. Tylenol is completely safe regardless of what the government says. Unless you're a heavy drinker. If you're a heavy drinker, Tylenol is not a good thing to take. That'll predispose you to, so the heavy drinking predisposes you to liver disease, then you can't process the Tylenol as well, and the Tylenol byproducts are toxic. So, but if you have a normal liver, you're fine. And if you drink responsibly.
Anybody else? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.